Amen. You may be seated. Thank you, worship team. Pastor Rick Warren states that the ultimate goal of Bible study is application, not just interpretation. He says, here's the problem. It is possible to know the Word of God and still not know the God of the Word. Think about that. Isn't that what happened in the first century when Jesus arrived? They didn't recognize Jesus as God's Son for who he was. And my concern is that it could very well be repeating itself. You've heard that phrase, history repeats itself. And so it's dangerous to have knowledge of him but yet not know him. I like what D.L. Moody said. He was a great evangelist back in the 17th century. He lived from 1837 to 1899, and yet some of the things still are very relevant for today. He said, the Bible was not given to increase our knowledge. I wish we would understand that, but it was given to change our lives. Is that why you listen to God's Word? Rick Warren says, there's all this debate. Everybody's hung up on which translation is the right translation. You got to read the right translation, because if not, you're going to get into trouble. I love his response. He says, the best translation is when you translate the Word of God to your daily life. Boy, isn't that the truth? You see, the gospel is an invitation to a real-life relationship with this triune God that we know as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You see, Jesus isn't someone that you just believe in. Jesus is someone that you do life with. That changes the whole ballgame. Paul the Apostle was writing to the church in Philippi. And of course, when Paul writes, he's trying to explain the gospel. He's trying to clarify, well, what is this gospel that did finally arrive and we have received and we've learned? And then he's trying to not just explain it, but also help them understand how to apply it in their lives. And he says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 9, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or even seen in me, put it into practice. And then he gives this promise. And the God of peace will be with you. Not may, not could, not might. He says he will be with you. But here's the catch. You got to live it out. You can't make the same mistake that the other Jewish leaders made and the Jewish people. See, this information is being given to us so that we might turn it into God's transformation of our lives. And so today we're talking about conflict. How to do conflict in real life. And I admit I didn't know this was coming. I attended a double casket funeral about a week and a half ago. I got the call from my mom. She said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but your cousin who lives in Kennedale was found murdered in his home along with his wife. And a few days later, it was disclosed that they believe it was a family member that did it. Conflict. Conflict is serious business. I mean, Jesus did tell us our enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he is serious about his aim. And so we just have to learn how to put the truth into practice, because if we don't, we suffer the consequences. And sometimes it can be, quite frankly, just totally devastating, as it was for that family at that funeral. So I want to talk to you about what is conflict. When are we susceptible to acting or reacting in conflict? How do we respond when somebody is being conflicted with us? And typically, we don't exactly do it the best way. And what are those ways that we tend to utilize when we react? And then lastly, so how do we, with God's presence, handle conflict in a healthy way? Now, I admit, I'm preaching a lot of information this morning, and I don't mean to bore anybody, but if you're the type that keeps a lot of meticulous notes, here's what I would tell you. Don't worry about the notes today. I want you to hear God today. We'll put the notes on the website so you can get them off the website. And that way you're not trying to hurry up and say, Pastor Ray just gave us way too much information and I can't get it all. Now I'm frustrated. When I get in the car, I'm going to be in conflict, right, with my husband. So relax. You'll get the information. What do we need to understand about conflict? Let's begin with God's perspective. Number one, conflict in a fallen world is inevitable. Can I be honest with you? Whether we like it or not, you better get ready because it's going to happen. It happened to me just last weekend. I thought, man, the enemy really must not want me to preach this sermon. I'm just minding my own business. I'm driving to the bank to make my deposit. And in 3 blocks, I got a guy like literally on my rear bumper, and I'm looking at him through the mirror, and I think he saw that I locked eyes with him. Like, why are you on my rear bumper? I take a left. He takes a left. He quickly swerves around me, and then he cuts me off, almost causing an accident. I'm going like, who is this guy? Has anybody ever had an experience like that? Yeah. And so here I am. I'm driving down Basswood. I'm thinking, okay, like, did I do something? Like, I don't recognize this guy. I don't recognize this car. And so I'm driving. And so I come to the traffic light. He's on the left. I'm on the right. After he cuts me off, then he gets back on the other lane. And so I could tell he's talking to me. I don't know. Do I look at him? Like, no speaking, no English. What do I do? I'm a little nervous, right? So I then turn my head over there. And, of course, he's in a windowless vehicle, so I roll my window down, and then he begins to curse me out. And he says, you better slow down in my neighborhood, you blankety blank, blankety blank. So by one of the blanks, I thought, okay, maybe he just gave me a cue. Maybe he doesn't like Hispanics. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But and quite frankly, it's like I'm in disbelief. Like, what is up with this guy? So I'm trying to think, okay, I'm about to preach conflict resolution, so maybe it's a good opportunity to put it to practice. No, I don't think so, because this guy is angry. And so as I just looked at him like this with this motion. I didn't use the one finger motion like others do with me. So he says, why don't you just pull over right now? I'm going to kick your beep, beep, beep. And I'm going like, okay, time to raise the window. I grab my phone. I grabbed the phone like this. I want him to think that I'm calling the police, right? Because he just threatened me. He immediately takes off, speeding down the road. I'm thinking, didn't he just tell me I shouldn't speed? And now he's speeding like there's something else going on here, and he quickly disappeared. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. If you are breathing, conflict will find you. It's just going to happen. So what are you going to do? Jesus himself knew what conflict was like. He had it even with his disciples. They would be a source of conflict. Notice what he says in John chapter 16, 32 to 33. He says, a time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. Wow, there's that concept of presence again. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Now, what's going on here? Jesus has been arrested. His disciples, which he has already now called his friends, have abandoned him. They've ran for the hills. And Jesus is telling them in advance, hey guys, look, you're going to all abandon me. But when you do, no problem. I'm not really physically alone because I'm spiritually accompanied by God himself, which is exactly what you're going to need to do when you're in your trouble. You're going to need his presence just as much as I will. And that is how you will overcome the world. So follow my lead. Wow. That's interesting, Jesus. Jesus is not holding it against them. In fact, we just read that Paul said, if you put God's truth into practice, his presence will be there. And of course, the question becomes, why does it seem like God is absent? Why does it seem like God is shallow, maybe even non-existent? And my response to you would be what Jesus said to his disciples, be it to you according to your faith. So it's not that God has disappeared or abandoned me. It's that maybe I haven't exactly let him get close to me. He's not the problem. The problem is right here. And he's trying to help me with my problem. So, secondly, conflict is inevitable. Conflict flows from our differences. You remember what happened in Acts chapter 15, 37 to 40? These are spiritual leaders. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. Now, are you the type of person that everybody has to agree with in order for you to be happy? Is that you? Have you noticed how easy it is to write people off when they don't think like you? You know, the last time I checked, somebody having a different opinion from me, it doesn't always qualify as a sin. Yet why do we treat them like, oh, okay, well, you know, it's obvious you got problems, therefore I'm going to treat you like a problem. We need to learn the art of wisdom that comes with agreeing to disagree. We see Jesus doing this all the time. He just simply knows how to love people despite themselves. And we have to follow his lead. But notice, thirdly, conflict arises out of our selfish desires. James chapter 4, verse 1 says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Let me give you 4 heart conditions that we might find ourselves having, and as a result, you can bet you're going to cause some conflict. Notice the first one, a greedy heart. Now, what does it mean to be greedy? The simple definition is it's an intense and selfish desire for something such as control, wealth, power, things of worth, things that we want and will stop at nothing to have. Proverbs 28:25 says, the greedy stir up conflict, but those who trust in the Lord will prosper. He's saying, look, there's 2 paths. Either you're God-dependent or you're self-dependent. And if you're God-dependent, he will give you favor. If you're self-dependent, you're going to get into trouble. Because your greedy heart is going to create some tension with those around you. And when that happens, next thing you know, you got conflict. So, what do? God's presence in real life. How does that change things? But notice, how about an angry heart? Do you have a tendency to react in anger? What is anger? It's a strong emotion of displeasure when? It occurs when our need and our expectation is not met. You want to see me angry? Just don't do what I believe I need you to do. Proverbs 15:18. A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms the quarrel. Isn't that amazing? That God gives us the pro and the con? If we lose our handle quickly, God is saying, could it be because you're being selfish versus selfless, which is only possible supernaturally when God fills you. And when he fills you, he also enables you to put water on the hot fire. Wow, what a difference. What a difference. Proverbs 29:22. An angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins. Isn't it amazing how one little matchstick can cause so much devastation in a fire? Just a little anger can leave a whole lot of damage behind it. I remember when I visited Chicago for the first time, I went to this one particular building that had survived the big, well-known fire, what was called the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. It was started by just a few sparks in a barn, but it led to approximately 300 people dying, 3.3 square miles being burnt, 17,000 structures burnt to the ground, 100,000 residents homeless. Just a few little sparks. You know what's interesting to me? God is saying, hey, look, you need to understand one thing. When your anger ignites, that eventually becomes a pattern. And that pattern is no longer just one sin. It's no longer just a few sins. Now it's many sins. And imagine the destruction that many sins can cause. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 11. A fool always loses his temper, but a wise person holds it back. What is one of the fruit that the Holy Spirit produces in our hearts? Self-control. Self-control. Why does he produce self-control in my heart? So that then I can hold it back. So that I won't unleash my feelings of anger and hurt people with it. But notice, thirdly, a perverse heart. Proverbs 17:10. One whose heart is corrupt does not prosper. One whose tongue is perverse falls into trouble. Didn't Jesus say what comes out of the mouth? Where did it come from? The heart. If I don't fill my heart with God's goodness, with God's presence through his Spirit, what's going to happen? Well, we already have clues of that. Jeremiah told us back in chapter 17, verse 9. He said, you know what's the most wicked thing that you can think of? What's the most wicked thing in the world? The word that he used was deceitful, desperately wicked. Your heart. And if you don't fill it with something better, you're going to hurt some people with it. What is the only thing that can change my heart? God's Spirit. And when God changes my spirit, then my tongue changes. See how this works? His presence comes out. And so the last thing is a hateful heart. Are we carrying an abrasive attitude? Now, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12 says, hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs. Now, most of us would be quick to say like, well, I'm okay on that one because I'm not a hateful person. Well, let me give you the definition of the word hate. It simply means to have a strong or intense dislike for someone. Uh-oh. Is there anybody that you strongly dislike? Ouch. I didn't really want to hear that, God. Because God is saying, can I be honest with you? Are you being hateful with that person? But you've watered it down, so like, I just don't like them. No, it's called hate. when you strongly dislike. And how do you know you hate that person? Here's how you know. When they show up, do you just naturally, because of God's supernatural presence, treat them with love? Does it just flow out of you? And if it doesn't, then you might ask yourself, maybe there's something else going on in your heart. And so it makes us aware that if the gospel of love is governing our hearts, it allows us to forgive people when they do wrong us. We just do it automatically. And if they haven't wronged us, but something happened, the chemistry or whatever is like, I'm not sure if we're going to be good friends. You know what happens? You just automatically say, but I'm going to love this person. Because that's what Jesus did with me. See, it's called practicing the gospel. Now, the last one on conflict is one that we probably don't think much about because nobody likes conflict. I mean, it's difficult. We see it simply as it's a negative thing that I don't need in my life. But if God can take sweet lemonade out of sour lemons, if God can take a severe thunderstorm and grow the grass faster and greener as a result, maybe there's something good that can come out of conflict that maybe I hadn't really considered. Conflict is an opportunity for growth in my life. It's an opportunity for the triumph of the grace that I so live by. So I have to make a choice. Am I going to become bitter as a result of my conflict, or am I going to become better as a result of my conflict? Notice what the Apostle Paul said to the Thessalonian church in chapter 2, verse 2 in the first letter. He says, but though we had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we had boldness. In who? In themselves? No, in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in the midst of what? Much conflict. Oh. So God didn't necessarily clear the path and turn it into a peaceful path so they could declare the gospel. It's like, no, it was just the opposite. If we need courage to face conflict, you need God on your side. That's the difference. A lot of times in the history of God's people, as you're reading the Old Testament, what you'll see is God's people are not fleeing, running away from conflict. They're actually going right into the conflict. And it's kind of surprising, like they're actually going to go face conflict? God, like, hello, God, where are you? They place their confidence in their God, and they face the conflict with his presence. Think about Jesus. He entered this world not to shy away from conflict, but to face it head on, and ultimately at the cross of Calvary. He faced it head on. And he's supposed to be our master that we're following for our example. That's why we're called disciples, apprentices. You see, God uses conflict to shape our character. The discomfort, the pain, the suffering, all the things that we would rather not experience, he says there are some things that I can only do in you when I get you out of your comfort zone. God, is this part of the training? Yep. You read the Old Testament. You read the New Testament. Conflict is pretty normal. So why do we expect that once we start following God, he's just going to take it all away? Where did we get that from? I need a problem-free life, Lord. Just give it to me. And if it's not happening, then we push them away. And God is saying, you're not listening. There are some things that I can only do in the valleys. And we all love mountaintops, but it's in the valley when you're going to see just how much you need me and need to trust me. David Mathis said the following: it is the toughest times and the hardest conversations. It's in the toughest times and the hardest conversations when the light of God's grace shines the brightest. Did you hear that? When you're in the darkest of times, one little flicker of light changes everything. Show me a strong person of faith, and I can almost assure you they've had to endure or overcome some struggles, some conflict, some pain and suffering. And that's why they're strong. So, what are some ways that we mismanage conflict when it happens to us? 3 ways. The first is the attacker. When we feel or perceive conflict, which can be threatening, or maybe they did cross the line and we're offended, we're hurt, and our reaction is, I'm going to fight back and I'm going to win this. Is that really the answer? Maybe your mama used to say, like my mama used to say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. That you do me wrong, I'll do you wrong is going to fix it. It makes it worse. I like what this author said. He says, an eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind. Oh man, that's so true. Maybe we're not the attacker type. Maybe we're the ones who withdraw. We're the withdrawer. When conflict shows up, we just jump ship. We just go around it. We just run from it. But did conflict really go away? No. In fact, when I ignore conflict, guess what happens? That conflict is going to fester and get worse. And I'm living in denial, saying everything's all right, but in reality, things are getting worse. But I still withdraw. This other author explaining this withdrawer approach says, here's what you have to understand. If you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you're actually starting a war inside yourself. You're not at peace. You've just invited that conflict to become internal. You're far from being at peace. You're at war with yourself. That doesn't work. And then how about the accommodator? The accommodator is the one who yields too much and sacrifices their own needs, and then they feel like they're walking on eggshells. They just become a pushover, and what happens when you're a pushover? Then they're going to just push you even more. They're going to take advantage of you even more. Nothing really ever gets solved. So what do? We need to learn how to dissolve and diffuse conflict God's way. Let me show you 7 quick ways to do that. We'll take the word diffuse as an acronym, and each letter will stand for a principle. The first one is D, define the problem. Don't seek to establish, well, who's most at fault, right? That's what we will do. Who's right? And I know I'm already right, so that's why I want to talk about it, right? Who do we need to blame shift to? You know, somebody's got to go down. There's always a winner. There's always a loser. Did we forget something here? Because the last time I read the gospel says it's a win-win situation. God wins and I win. There is no loser. So why do we try to change the approach on how to solve the problem? We're all susceptible to making mistakes. So we need to instead seek to find a solution. And we do that by first clarifying the main problem. Notice I said the main, singular, not 50, 100 problems. Just what's the main problem here? Just one. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 14. A wise person is hungry for truth, while the fool feeds on trash. Let me give you my paraphrase, 21st century version of that. Am I hungry for the ugly truth if necessary, or would I prefer eating pretty lies from the dumpster? Got two options. Ugly truth, pretty lies. Which is it? God is saying, be a wise person. Go after the truth. What did Jesus say about truth? If you know and you practice the truth, what did he say? He said the truth will enslave you. What did he say? The truth will set you free. So, I need to change my perspective concerning the truth. I need the truth, even if it's going to hurt me. If I want to break through, I have to be willing to be honest with myself before God so that I can experience the freedom from this problem. That's D. I. I is for initiate a time and a place to talk. Matthew chapter 5, 23, 24. So if you're standing before the altar in the temple offering a sacrifice to God, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there beside the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. What's most important to God? Is it really your house? Is it your good looks? Is it your guns, muscular or otherwise? What is it? What is most important to God? Love relationships from the heart, yes. It's about the love relationships. In fact, he says, hey, you want to do a love relationship with me? Then you're going to have to get serious about doing love relationships with everybody else, because if you don't want to do this one over here, then we have problems with this one over here. Oh, man, I knew he was going to say that. There is a reason why Peter said, you want to sink your prayer life? Just mistreat your wife. And when you talk to God, he's not going to answer you. What is he saying? Take care of your relationships the way God is taking care of you. Because if you don't practice this over here, we're wasting our time. Is anybody listening? We're wasting our time. God is saying, you don't get it. Look at the first century Jews. They didn't get it. You have to get it. It's about the love relationship. And it doesn't stop right here. It goes out here as well. If you're married, and I ask you, where have you already predetermined, pre-agreed your when and where on how to resolve conflict? Could you answer the question? Where is your when and where? Now, I already know what some of you are going to say. Oh, no, I don't need to answer that. We never have problems in our house. Oh, yes, you do. Conflict is inevitable, we've already said, from God's perspective. So, what if the conflict happens at dinner time? Are you going to solve it at dinner time? Can I be honest with you? If you try, nobody's going to eat. If the conflict happens at midnight when you're ready to go to bed, is that when you're going to do it? Then nobody's going to rest and nobody's going to sleep, and it's going to show up when you go to work the next day. And you're working for Jesus, according to the Apostle Paul. Is it going to happen when the in-laws show up and then you get upset and you're going to do it in front of your in-laws? Is that the right time? What? No, I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. But think, we're talking wisdom. Conflict resolution requires wisdom. I mean, just think about all these SWAT situations where they have to call in the negotiators. Why? Because it requires wisdom. If you don't have wisdom, somebody can die. That's how serious it is. On the Wednesday class, as Jerry was teaching, he brought to the light, and we're all like, oh, yeah, murder is bad, but you know what? You don't treat your brother right, you mistreat your brother, that's just as bad. Oh. All of a sudden, we have a change of heart regarding treatment of brothers. Why? Because God is into love relationships. F. F is for focus on the perceived problem, not on the person. Would you agree that we're prone to want to attack the person? Am I the only one? Right? My wife is a beautiful woman. But when we have a conflict, my reaction is, okay, I need to put her in her place. That's not from God. Right? I already know, like, no, that's not from God. That's the flesh speaking. So what do? Like I said, the gospel is about a win-win situation. It's not a winner and a loser. A good investigator would tell you the following: stick to the facts. Don't judge their motives. Avoid the generalizations. They're usually not true. Focus on their behavior. Don't attack their character. What did Jesus do when he was hung on the cross? Luke 23:24. Jesus said, Father, forgive these people because they don't know what they're doing. Now, Jesus doesn't agree with their behavior, yet he's asking God to do what? God just send fire from heaven and wipe them out. No, he doesn't attack the people. He doesn't ask God to attack the people. He says, God, give them what they don't deserve. Forgive them. That's what he does with the people. Now, he didn't water down the behavior. He knows what they did. You see, but Jesus has a much wider panoramic view of what's going on here. What is the problem? Who's at fault? He's not trying to answer who's at fault. He could say, well, it's obviously the Jewish people because they all said, yeah, crucify him. Well, no, it's the soldiers because they're the ones who, put the nails in his hand like, no, yeah, that's true. Well, it's the Jewish leaders because they're the ones who came up with the lies and so forth. Why isn't Jesus pinpointing for us who's at fault here? Jesus knows what the problem is. And you know what the problem is? It's called sin. And why has he come? Not to condemn, but to resolve the problem. Voila. Wow. I got an example with Jesus. Where have I been looking all this time? If I would just do what he says, it would change everything. Proverbs 18:19. A brother who has been insulted is harder to win back than a walled city, and arguments separate people like the barred gates of a palace. Do I really want to insult this person? Do I really want to have a heated argument with this person? According to God's word? No. Because it's going to be hard to win them back if you attack this person. Whatever happened to God hates sin, but he loves the sinner? That's a good approach. I need to love people and be disappointed with the behavior, the sin. Because after God didn't condemn me and save me, he then put me on the same rescue mission team and said, now I'm going to use you to also be a bearer of mercy, grace, and love, just like I was. Oh, but God, you don't understand, like that guy over there, he's my enemy. Oh, Jesus got that covered too? Yep. What did Jesus say? Jesus said, love your enemies. Oh, I forgot that one. I must have been sleeping during that short phrase. God, why do you make this so difficult? Because I'm transforming you to look like me through real life situations. I know you'd rather be like a monk and go over there in some little corner somewhere, separated from the world. But no, you're going to be in the world, just not of the world. Because I go where you go. And I make the difference. If you'll just trust me and practice what I tell you, you'll see the results. So F, the second F, feel their pain as though it were your own. Oh man, that's a tough one. Feel their pain as though it were your own. I could feel the tension at the funeral. Because you have a husband and a wife, a stepmother to a family member that is alleged to have killed them both. And so you got one side of the family upset with the other side of the family. Why? If your family hadn't got with my family, my mom would still be here. Now I'm upset with you. You see how this works? That's real life. Feel their pain as if it were your own. Genesis 2:24, for those of us that are married, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into what? One. One. God says, now you're one. So what do? You have to listen to what is felt as well as what is said. Now, for us guys, I know that's hard because we're objective, right? We don't like the feely, warm stuff, fuzzy, warm stuff. Like, I'm a man, right? I take care of business. Yeah. But you're married to a woman. That's different. They're not wired like you. Now you're going to have to feel their pain. Why would you want me to do that? That's against my masculinity. Because God put you in the same boat, and if the boat has a hole on the floor of it, guess who is going down? Both of you. Because you're one. If you disrespect her, you disrespect your marriage. Are you aware of that? Because you're one. God has taken two and made them one. So if I hurt her, I hurt myself. Yes. Philippians 2 verse 4. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Your flesh and the enemy will tell you, just explode on her. Let her have some good medicine. Feel the pain, right? You got a charger for that. That's not God speaking. Because if God is speaking, he's going to say, let's be calm. Let's not get defensive. Let's show a little respect. Kind of like how God did with you. Okay. Yes. Because if I do this relationship, it's going to affect these other relationships. And so I have to humble myself and say, I need to be in their shoes. But notice the U. The U is for uncover the root cause of your problems. All right? Hebrews chapter 4, 12 to 13. Speaking of God's word, it judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. So let God's word be in the center of your relationship with whoever. The purpose of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. Proverbs 20, verse 5. So you may say, well, our problem is money. Okay, you're going to have to go a little deeper. Like, what do you mean by that? Is it gambling? Is it different values on money? Is it spending habits? Like, we're going to have to go a little deeper on this money problem thing. Where is the real root cause for our money problems? Is it work related? What about work? Is it your schedule? Is it the benefits? Is it the hours? Let's get specific here if we're going to solve this problem. You get the idea. When I was in the corporate world, we would use this little exercise called the 5 whys. How many of you have heard of the 5 whys? Okay, a couple of us. And so all you do with the 5 whys is you help a person hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel when you dig deeper beyond what they say is the problem. Let me give you an illustration. So the guy comes into work late, and the manager says, okay, so why were you late to work this morning? Employee answers, well, I got delayed because, I was trying to hurry to get to work, and a cop stopped me, and I got a ticket. You see, he's thinking like, problem solved. Manager says, oh, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Nobody likes getting tickets. So why were you speeding? The guy says, duh, I was running late. The manager says, yeah, I got that part, but why were you running late? He says, well, I overslept this morning. And then the manager says, okay, yeah, that's happened to me. So why did you oversleep? I knew you were going to ask me that question. You see, last night, my buddies were playing video games online, and they sent me an invitation, and so I ended up playing till 2 in the morning, and so that's why I overslept. So then the manager says, so why would you do that if you knew you had to get up at 6 in the morning to go to work? Then he finally says, I guess because I cared more about playing games with my friends last night than I really cared about being at work on time. But the manager says, okay, do we have a mutual understanding on the real root cause of this problem? So next time you have a problem with your marriage, you could just say, honey, I want to practice the 5 whys. I may not get it exactly right, so just cooperate with me. We're just practicing so that we can learn how to uncover the root cause of our problem. Okay? But here's what you have to remember, that next time when the one who makes the mistake is you, she's going to say, honey, it's my turn to practice the 5 whys. So if you'll give me the opportunity, you see how this works? Because you're growing together. You're one. S, set it right between you. Matthew 18:15, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the difference. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. So it means when you have a conflict, you don't say, okay, well, I'm calling my daddy. Right? Or you say, well, I'm calling my mama because she knows how to cook. What are we doing here? We're adding wood into the fire, and we're making it bigger. So what do? You decide in advance, we're going to work this out between you and me, and God in the middle. That's what we're going to do. And while you're doing that, you're going to assume the posture and practices of the Jesus that you've invited into your life, that you're doing life with, because he already said through the Apostle Paul, chapter 3, verse 13, you must make allowance. I know my son is thinking money right now, but no, I'm not. This is not about money. You must make allowance for each other's faults and forgive the person who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Have you noticed that we always keep going back to the gospel? Have you noticed that? That somehow God wants us to have gospel-centered lives, that we don't forget, how did this all get started in the first place? I take that and I bring it to the present, and I continue to live in it with others. And the last E, the last letter E, establish a specific plan that addresses the issue discussed. Now, you've already established the why. Now we got to talk about, okay, how are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? Is there a where on how we're going to do this? What are we going to do? This is the plan. As a result of all this dialogue, you got to come up with, okay, so what are we going to do next? to correct this, to resolve this. And if you seem to still be lacking a plan, what do? Then you invite somebody from the outside that is unbiased, that you trust, that is spiritually mature, to come in and say, we need a little extra help to get us over this bump with your insights. Proverbs 20:18, make plans by seeking advice. There's success in many advisors. And then when you have a plan, now you got to execute. Now you've got to live it out. Now you got to do what you agreed to, because if you don't, guess what? You're back to square one, and now your credibility is right back where it started. And that's not good. You want to build forward and rebuild trust and rebuild the relationship. Do it with peace, and then give the results to God. James chapter 1, verse 22, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. In other words, follow through. Do what you said you were going to do. Romans 14:19, let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification. Conflict is not going to get resolved by you simply praying about it. Prayer is an expression of faith. Obedience is a wider expression of faith. I think what God is saying is, when are we going to show up on the matters of life? When do we get to that? Because when we get to that, that's one of the ways that you will see me manifest myself in that situation. If God can resurrect bodies, He can resurrect marriages. He can resurrect families. He can resurrect whatever He wants. He's the power source. But I've got to connect with that power source. Otherwise, I'm just spinning my wheels. Otherwise, I'm just talking about it. When does it become a real life experience? Everybody loves talking about God, but when does it become a real life experience? When's the last time that God showed you something in real life? Yes, He speaks through His Word, but His Word is meant to be applied, is meant to be lived. So when you did that, what did you learn then? Because God says, if you practice it, I'm going to show up. And if He's not showing up, it's because I'm just not practicing it. And we already know what lip service does to God. You don't like it. So, as we close, we've talked about a lot regarding conflict. We have to get it right. The gospel is about dealing with conflict. And our lives should be about dealing with conflict. It should be clear to everybody else, you have something that I apparently don't have. And it's called God's power and presence in real life. Not just when I get to heaven, but right now while I'm walking on this earth. And you know what the best part is? When you fast forward, you can talk about it. Like, oh, you don't know. My marriage was in the dumps. I mean, as far as other people are concerned, it was dead. But God brought it back to life. Let me tell you about it. Cost me something, yes. But God did His part. And that's the hero of the story. Let's pray.